All right, I think we're good. All right. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock, recording this here on Tuesday. It's about 4:30 when we're recording this, and we're going to talk a number of different things here. And I want to start with this because I spent a little bit of time today doing research on an event called ProMat 2025. And for those of you that don't know, first of all, congratulations for not being in the loop on this. But also, it is a supply chain conference. It was taking place in Chicago, and there was a social media rumor going around because Shedeur Sanders was the keynote speaker. And there was a social media rumor going around that Shedeur basically said, Shedeur wants to go to the Giants. And all it was a picture of Shedeur speaking at this event. There was no video, nothing like that, and then a tweet accompanying it. We didn't take the bait, but Mary Kay, it just, to me, it spoke to this idea of this is just draft season right now. This is draft season in 2025, where someone with not very many followers on Twitter can post something like this. It gets traction. This is sort of the Shedeur experience, right? It's one of those things where anything that has to do with those guys is going to gain traction in the social media world. So this is something that people ran with. Like I said, we did not, but it just speaks to kind of the environment we're in here. About a month now, officially less than a month away from when the Browns are going to make this pick at number 2.
Yes, that's right. And I think that's why I think it is so vitally important to be careful about what you retweet, to be careful about what you repeat. And for the consumers of Browns content, I think it's vitally important to focus on the people that really are trying hard to get it right, the people that cover the football team on a regular basis and know what's going on with this team. There's so much noise out there. There's so many distractions out there. There's so many bloggers that have Browns this and Browns that, and it's hard to discern anymore truth from fiction, especially at this time of year when there's so much misinformation going around. But this was one of those things where I think that what you have to do is try to figure out, okay, what I just saw on the internet, was that true? Did Shedeur Sanders actually say this? And I went and I looked, and all I could find, like you said, was this screenshot of Shedeur supposedly giving his keynote address at the supply chain conference. And there was no video that he said that. There was no audio that he said Shedeur would prefer the Giants, or we want to go to New York, or whatever they said that he said. And then I went and looked at the originating person who tweeted it, the original person, and this person had like 600 Twitter followers. So it's not a media person. It's not a sports writer. It's not someone who is savvy in this space in any way, shape, or form. And so I stayed away from it. And one of the first things that I did was I went into our group text at cleveland.com, where 10 of us are in there that have anything to do with the Browns and our bosses. And I just said, when I hear some audio or see some video that Shedeur actually said this, then it rises to the level of me maybe aggregating it and doing a post on it. At this point, it's not that, because I have no idea if he said this or not, and I'm not going to repeat a rumor. I'm not going to do it. It's not fair to the fans to do that. That's too big. That is just way too big of a news item to get that wrong. For Shedeur and Shedeur to be saying he prefers New York. Okay. If he said it, then I need to hear it. I need to see it. So as time went on with this, so I just said, I'm not touching it. As time went, but I will say that some local media members did touch it, and some local news outlets did retweet it and did quote tweet it. And I just wanted to make sure that all of us knew that that's not how we're going to operate in these crazy times. That's not what we're going to do. So, and not that I had to tell anybody. We all know not to do that. And then today, supposedly, once again, Dion shoots it down, saying something like, that's a lie. We never said that. He'd be blessed or whatever to go to any team that drafts him, which is what he's been saying all along. But once again, until I actually see this with my own two eyes, which I think it's legit that he said this in a response to something on Instagram, but I still don't want to legitimize the initial lie. So I'm still not going to write about it because it was BS and it should not have been spread around by responsible journalists. I'm sorry. I just feel very strongly about this because then we have to go cleaning up the mess on aisle 7. And I don't think we should have to do that. We're trained professionals and there's a lot of BS out there. And I think that we have to try really hard to provide our readers and listeners with the best and most accurate information we possibly can.
This goes in one of those categories that I always feel like, we talk about Twitter, we talk about social media, and it's not really real life, but we spend a ton of time on there, right? It's a big part of our jobs. And there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time on social media, but there is this segment there's obviously a lot of people that just aren't on Twitter all day, or they don't even have Twitter or whatever. And I don't even know where I would start to explain something like this to them. Like, well, listen, there's this conference in Chicago for supply chains, and Deion Sanders was the keynote speaker there. And I don't know where I would even begin. But yeah, it does come down to, Ashley, like the smell test. Like, does this feel right? And, I sort of feel bad because there are like small bloggers and smaller personalities on Twitter that do it right. Like they really, they're doing it for fun, but they do it right. And then you have stuff like this where it's just somebody trying to get attention, and you just always have to, and it's only going to get worse. You always have to just ask yourself first and foremost, this doesn't feel like something's not right here. Something's off. Where's a video? Why is this just a photo with a tweet from some guy with 600 followers? Like you've got to do that first.
Exactly. I mean, with all of this stuff, you have to do your due diligence. And it's like what we've said with the draft already, even without like people just out of the blue potentially starting rumors or posting things to try to get engagement on personal accounts. Even without that, there's so much misleading and purposefully leaking things by the teams, right? Or various people with agendas, agents, like whoever that may be. There, we've discussed recently, for example, right, all this negativity around Shedeur Sanders. Like that just seems like something very manufactured when he's the only quarterback right now whose stock is kind of going in the opposite direction and going downward. Everyone else, their stock is rising. All these other guys at the top of this draft class. So I think there's an element of that. And like Mary Kay said, I mean, I think we all saw this screenshot too of in the aftermath of Dion supposedly refuting these comments on Instagram. But then right now, when we all just looked and went to that post, that comment's not there. So we have to just question everything and be like, okay, was that photoshopped? Did somebody delete it? Like, it's hard when you can't see things with your own eyes to know for sure. And it's not like we can call up Deion Sanders and ask him. I mean, that would be ideal, but we don't have that kind of access to him. I don't really think anybody does. And it just makes it that much more difficult. But on top of it all, it's just there's so much intrigue, gamesmanship, lying. What's Mary Kay's phrase? A GM would lie to his grandmother or dog if he had to right now. So you have to keep that in mind. Like, you don't even need people on X, Twitter, or Instagram making up rumors. Like, there's enough of that going on amongst the people who actually know what is happening in the draft.
I will say Twitter used to be fun, but now it's just sort of, I kind of miss the days of, when somebody would just get duped by a fake Adam Schefter or something, and then everybody would have a good laugh and we move on. Those were the good old days. Let me say this though about Pro Mat 25. I might go next year. I mean, they've got like this event looked, it was big and bright. And obviously, like Dion was a keynote speaker this year. I don't know who it's going to be next year. They have a podcast that they put up. So, like, they've got all kinds of social media. Like, I might be in on ProMat 2026. Mary Kay, we've been through this before with big personalities here in Cleveland. Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, Shedeur Sanders falls into this camp. It has nothing to do with whether a guy is talented or not. There are just certain people who, if you say something about them, if you tweet about them, if you go on First Take and say and have some hot take about them, it's going to go crazy. And this is just an example of Shedeur Sanders is going to be one of those people, probably more so than Cam Ward, more so than any of these other quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders is going to be a lightning rod in the way that, and again, I'm not comparing him talent wise to any of these players. I'm just saying the personality and him being a lightning rod, the same as Johnny Manziel was, the same as Baker Mayfield was. Just you can pick any number of quarterbacks and any number of athletes. He's going to be that wherever he ends up.
Right. And he's going to be that in part because of who his dad is. It's the package deal. When you're talking about Shedeur, you're always talking about Dion and everything that you get with Dion. And no matter what's happened to Shedeur along the way, Dion has weighed in on it. He has commented on it. If anybody says anything about anything, he is not shy about jumping on social media and weighing in some way. And I think it's going to be that way the whole time Shedeur is in Cleveland, if he is in Cleveland. I think you're going to get a lot of feedback. I think you're going to be getting a lot of the father-son combo that comes along with drafting Shedeur. He comes with a bit of an entourage. He comes as a package deal. And that's fine. I mean, I'm sure the Browns have already thought this through. And if they draft him, they know what they're getting. So if they're comfortable with it, that's fine. They just have to know that this is going to come along with some theater. And there has already been theater with the last 4 or 5 big name quarterbacks that the Browns have brought onto this football team. Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, Deshaun Watson. If they want to go that route where you're going to have potential distractions and things like that, if they feel like they've got the infrastructure to handle it and the culture to be able to handle that, then so be it. Go for it. Do whatever you have to do. But you just have to go into it knowing that this is going to be part of it. And I just want to say one more thing about these people that do things like this. If they are making something up and throwing it out there, I can't tell you the amount of times that they have come back afterwards and said, I can't believe everybody bid on that. I can't believe that all those people were faked out by that and got duped. So let's not get duped, people. Let's not let that happen this cycle. Let's try.
Well, it's one guy kind of looking for attention, and then all these other places that are like, well, I can get attention off this too. They kind of pile on, including legitimate media outlets. So it's just the ball starts rolling downhill. Ashley, it is going to be important for the Browns if they take Shedeur. They're going to have to make sure that they can keep themselves insulated because, look, the first time he goes out there and goes 12 for 25 and throws 2 interceptions in a loss, which is probably going to happen because he's going to be a rookie. And that's what happens with rookies. They have bad games sometimes. It's going to get talked. It's going to be a big topic on Monday. People are going to be ready to pile on and say, oh, Shedeur's not it. The Browns made a mistake. Like, it just kind of people looking for attention, big and small. So the Browns have to, this organization has been through that before, but they have to understand what they're taking on and what they're going to have to kind of insulate themselves from if they do make this decision at number 2.
Yeah, and I would say too, because if people want to assume he's going to the Giants or whatever, I would argue that's even more so for the New York Giants in the top media market in the country, which is, I think, a notoriously hard place to play in terms of negative attention getting piled on you. Like, I certainly think it would be a bit easier for him here in Cleveland than it would be out there as a rookie. And I mean, we're a large beat for, I think, the market size we are. And we all know that. We comparatively see the other beats. We have so many people covering this team, but the New York media is just it's a totally different landscape. So I think that's part of it. I do think, to your point, Dan, like the Browns have to be prepared for it. But I keep going back to, like, I'm sure if whatever team takes Shedeur, whether it's the Browns or somebody else, there's going to be a circus element to this because of the Dion aspect, because of all these things we know about him. But I also keep thinking about what we have seen from Shedeur and what we have seen from Dion, and like what we have heard. It hasn't been, I don't think, like nearly as crazy as I anticipated it would be. And like we said, every time we've seen Dion up until this point talk about where Shedeur might go, it's, well, we'll be happy with wherever he goes, right? It's this very sort of by the book answer. It's not really advocating for him to go anywhere. It's not super meddling to me. And then I think about Shedeur's presser at the combine, very personable, complimenting reporters' jewelry. Like, it wasn't flashy in a way that felt like there's no substance, right? Like, I think a lot about the question where someone asked him who he'd be most excited to throw to, and he listed off his Colorado receivers, right? Like, there was something there that I saw where I'm like, yes, like there's flash, but there's also substance. And I, even though it's gonna be a circus, like I don't think it's going to be totally off the rails immediately. Now, I don't know, maybe somebody will clip this in 5 years and I'll be totally wrong. But I'm to our larger point here, I'm only going off what I know we have seen and heard in person and from actual interview clips with these people.
Okay, let's talk about the other quarterback that could be on the Browns' radar, and that's Cam Ward. He had his pro day on Monday, and the Titans seem to be sort of honing in a little bit on Cam. They're going to have him in for a private workout. There was a tweet out today that they're expected to listen to offers for the number one overall pick, but it now would take an even stronger package to acquire the draft's top selection. We kind of get this from teams who are picking number one. They'll float it out there that it might still be available, even if it's not. Cam Ward, listen, I think Cam Ward is, we're going to start doing draft pods with Tim and Lance next week. And Tim has been the Shedeur Sanders is his number one guy. Lance has been Shedeur's the best fit for the Browns guy. I've sort of come around to feeling like Cam Ward is, and I don't really usually sit here and rank these prospects, but I like Cam Ward the best of these guys. I do like Shedeur as well. Mary Kay, the idea of trading up for number one, even going back to the combine, it didn't seem like it was something the Browns were interested in doing. But do you think that's on the table for this football team? Or do you think they would just be content to let this thing play out? Because if they like both these guys, they're guaranteed to end up with at least one of them.
It's really hard to know what they're interested in doing. I don't really know if they like Cam well enough or like him much more than they like Shedeur to be willing to give up whatever it would take to trade up to number one to get him. Because if I am the Titans, even if I'm just going back to number two, you'd have to absolutely probably love Shedeur yourself there, or you'd have to be prepared to be able to take Travis Hunter there or Abdul Carter there if you are the Titans. So they're going to get offers, and I don't know if the Browns would have what it takes to move up to number one. I don't even know if they would move up to number one. But I will say this. If they love Cam Ward, if they absolutely love him, and they feel that he is the sure bet from this draft, then I would for sure toss my hat into the ring. I would absolutely pick up the phone and make that phone call and see what they would be willing to take and if you would be able to swing it. Because if it means the difference between getting the absolute best quarterback in the draft, one who is, by all accounts now, probably going to be a franchise quarterback, then I think it's worth it. I think it's absolutely worth it. So I would for sure be looking into it. And I don't know. I mean, we're going to talk to Kevin and Andrew at the NFL owners meetings starting. It's Sunday in West Palm, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. In that time frame, the small group of reporters that will go down there from here will sit down with Andrew Berry, We will sit down with the Haslams, and then we will go to the coaches' breakfast where Kevin sits at a table, and then anybody who wants to be part of that from anywhere in the country can sit around the table and hear from Kevin as well. So maybe we'll have a better idea then of how they feel. But I will also tell you this, we might have no idea how they feel after that, because this is the time to send out smoke signals and mixed signals. So some of the misinformation that's out there is by design, as we all know. Some of it is to throw people off and to mess people up. What if you could get the Giants to come up to number 2? Because for some reason, they are absolutely convinced that you're taking Shedeur, and you can get them to come up and make a trade with you. So don't know yet where any of this is going to go, but I would 100% do whatever it takes to get Cam if you love him and you think he's a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, then that's the one thing about the move up to number 1. If you're going to go, I'm going to steal your phrase, Mary Kay, if you're going to go footballs to the wall and go get Cam Ward, like that's a completely, I mean, we've talked endlessly here about, hey, if you love a quarterback, take him at number 2, right? Trading up to number 1 is a little bit different though. Like you have to be as certain as you can possibly be that Cam Ward's going to be that guy, because it's not just taking a guy. It's, I don't know, would you have to give up your first next year? You'd probably have to give up something valuable next year, whether it's a first or a second, plus your pick this year. You'd have to give up a lot to move up to take that. So it goes beyond just, we're going to sit at number 2, take a quarterback and, try and make this work. Well, now you're giving up stuff down the road. So that's the key difference, is you have to be absolutely certain, or as certain as you can be, that Cam Ward is that much better than Shedeur Sanders or any of these other quarterbacks. And that beyond that, just in the scope of multiple years, that he's one of those guys. He's a Jaden Daniels type. He's a franchise changing type. And I do think he has that ceiling. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but that's really the difference here, Ashley, is like, it's not just sitting at 2 and taking a guy, which comes with its own risk. It's giving up stuff to move up, and it's basically mortgaging more of your future to take a guy. So you better know for certain.
Yeah, and that just doesn't feel like something this regime would do right now necessarily in terms of mortgaging certain aspects of their future. I mean, just because look how well that's worked out for them post Deshaun Watson, right? It's been hard, but I think to the point, if you do think Cam Ward is a franchise guy, those conversations need to be had. You need to consider it. But if you're like, you know what, this is just kind of a weaker class, we don't feel that strongly about him to give up a ton for our future, and we're comfortable with taking somebody else, we're comfortable with multiple other options, then you don't make the move. But I think if you think that Cam Ward is the guy, could be like that Jaden Daniels, then you're going to have to consider it at this point, because the Titans have done a really nice job, I think, from watching them from afar, of creating some intrigue, because, their GM made that comment even before the combine about they wouldn't pass up on generational talent. And everyone was just kind of assuming, like, well, that probably means Travis Hunter, right? The Browns are going to have their pick of either of these guys at 2 between Shedeur and Cam. And now the narrative has just really shifted, and it seems like they are trending towards being the favorite to draft him. It seems like every mock draft I read has Cam Ward going number 1 to the Titans. So I think when you talk about the gamesmanship of the draft, they've done a good job of putting multiple narratives out there that also, in theory, by the way, wouldn't be the worst thing in terms of helping make somebody jump up and take that pick off their hands.
Quick update here. ProMat 2025, by the way, broke the record for the biggest event in its history. So there you go. Good.
Dan,
for
would
those
you
guys.
rather spend a week at the Combine or ProMat 2026?
I'll tell you what, I'm thinking about doing ProMat next year. We'll see. I might run it by our boss Dave Campbell and see if maybe I can score a trip to ProMat instead of the Combine is fun, but come on, ProMat. There's a movement. There's a movement happening. Okay, one more thing I want to get to, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about off the top, the name Brandon Aiyuk. is being floated out there. And of course, the Browns, I assume, would maybe be interested if the San Francisco 49ers actually did want to trade Brandon Aiyuk. Time is a flat circle. Here we go again, Mary Kay, talking about could the Browns go get the 49ers receiver. Of course, he had a season-ending injury. He'd be coming off of that. But I guess, what do you make of some of the Brandon Aiyuk stuff? Is this just kind of social media doing what social media does, like we were saying earlier? Could there be something to this? I know he's got some kind of bonus or something coming up on April 1st that the 49ers would have to pay. So that's kind of one of the first deadlines that we kind of get an answer. Is there something here?
Still checking and digging around, but once again, it hasn't risen to the level of anything worth reporting at this point. I just don't know from a salary cap standpoint if the Browns want to take on another pretty high priced receiver like that right at the moment. I think if anything, they might rather draft one and get a nice rookie contract instead of taking on Brandon Aiyuk's large contract. So I'm going to say no for right now. I've stayed away from it. Once again, this is something that we need to keep digging into and see what we can come up with and find. And we can go talk to Kyle Shanahan at the coaches breakfast. They do an AFC one and an NFC one. Sometimes you see the general managers walking around. They're not available per se, but sometimes you get things out of them, or their reporters get to meet with them, and then stuff comes out. So there will be some Brandon Aiyuk news coming up at the owners' meetings. There's no question about it. So we will know by the end of the weekend or early next week if there's anything to these. But right now, it just hasn't gotten to the point where I feel comfortable addressing it. Once again, the origin of some of these tweets, I just didn't feel comfortable with where the reports or rumors were coming from. And I don't have anything substantial yet that tells me that they are involved in this. So I'm going to wait and exercise caution and try to get it as right as possible.
So while you were talking there, I looked this up just so we have it. According to Spotrac, on April 1st, $26.15 million of 2026 compensation fully guarantees. There's an option bonus of $22.855 million and an option bonus in 2026 of $24.935 million. So that all happens on April 1st, which is why that's kind of the deadline. That's kind of the, hey, if you're going to trade him or if you're going to keep him, you get past April 1st, it probably seems more likely like he'll still be a 49er. So Ashley, again, here we go. Social media rumors, Brandon Aiyuk, just like last spring or last fall. But the Browns are also in a different place. Obviously, they still want to try and win football games. But even with that in mind, this team is just still in a different place than they were last August when we were trying to figure out, could this team make a Super Bowl run?
They are in a different place, as Paulinka's laying on my lap right now currently, as you can see in the video. They're in a different place. And again, I just keep thinking about, I think this team just always feels more strongly about its receivers than we ever will. We talked about it before. I've come to grips with it. But I mean, I do think they're onto something with Jerry Jeudy being a legit potential number one for them after the year he had. I think they're so big on giving these guys they like opportunities. I feel like by bringing a guy like that in on top of all the money issues and the cap issues it creates, it would mean that there are fewer opportunities for Jerry too. And I don't think that they would really be a fan of that. I think they want to see how he can build. Obviously, I think they feel really strongly about said too. It just makes sense in a pretty decent receiver class to just draft somebody and get that room younger instead of going down the Brandon Aiyuk path again.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be completely opposed, Mary Kay. I mean, he just turned 27. I mean, I could see the case for bringing him in, but also I do want to still see them draft a guy. I don't know. I mean, there's a case to be made for Aiyuk, but again, this team is in such a different place than it was when we were having this discussion back in August.
Right. And I think the reason why it even comes up is because of the history and the pattern of Andrew Berry. A lot of times when he tries to trade for someone, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And he has sometimes landed a guy the second time around, like he did with Jerry Jeudy. So I think that's why, even though we haven't been able to necessarily substantiate any kind of trade talks, why we have to at least have it in the back of our minds, why we have to at least think about it, check into it, and wonder about it, because he tried to trade for him last year, being willing to ship Amari Cooper and all of those kinds of things. So, and that was happening during training camp. And because he has been interested in him before, then I think that, that brings it back up again. But there were some issues even back then that might make this sort of unrealistic. And I'm not really sure if they're going down this road again.
Yeah, and I do think it's always important to look at this from not just what an individual person listening to this or thinks of where this team is going, but what Andrew Berry thinks this team can do. So if he's looking at this like, hey, we're going to start winning again, we're going to win more games than people think this year, and we're going to be right back at it, and we're not far off over these next 2 years. We're going to surprise some people. Brandon Aiyuk could be a part of that, right? Like, he's kind of looking at it. They're viewing it, I think, a little differently than some outside people might be viewing it. But we know that Andrew is always looking to improve this team. We know he's always looking to be aggressive. So again, it wouldn't shock me if they made this move. I do think it's worth noting that I'm sure they would acknowledge, like, kind of where this roster is now versus where it was in August is different. But Brandon Aiyuk actually is young enough that you could bring him in. And if you're really thinking, hey, we can win 9-10 games this year and then next year get back at it, okay, but bring in Brandon Aiyuk. I could see why the Browns could talk themselves into something like that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely plausible. I think in terms of the getting younger, my point earlier, it's more so about the contract and getting a guy on a nice team-friendly rookie deal, because he is still in his 20s, obviously. So, I mean, I think he's a good player. I think it would totally change the dynamic of this offense. Like, it's certainly not a move I'd be like, well, why the heck did they do that? I don't understand that. I do think it would elevate their pass catching core, and we've all talked about how we think they need to do more there. So it wouldn't surprise me. It would, I think, very much feel to me comparable to the Amari Cooper deal 3 years ago when you go out and get him, and it's not something that was really on anybody's radar until right before it happened, but that we've seen them do this before. And I mean, same thing with Jerry. They like Jerry for ever since he was in that draft class. So to Mary Kay's point, when they like somebody, and they have their reasons. So it depends on how much they have invested already in terms of their desire to have Brandon Aiyuk on the football team.
Yeah, Andrew Berry is very stubborn when it comes to this stuff. And to his credit, he was adamant about Jerry Jeudy, and it worked. So, and he got him at a really good price too after they did that extension. So, we'll see. We'll keep tabs on that. That will do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. If you want to see Ashley get mauled by her dog throughout this podcast, there'll probably be some clips of that on our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. We put the full pods up there if you want to watch us. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you're just good with listening. Get subscribed at those places. Football Insiders, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Instagram's Orange and Brown Talk. Twitter is Orange Brown Talk. I think that's everything. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.